Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Board of Education for Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. I would like to start out by reminding everyone that this meeting will be live streamed. As per policy number 7, regular and special meetings of the board may be live streamed, archived, and accessed online. The board reserves at its sole discretion, via motion at any meeting, the right to not stream live or archive a meeting or a portion of a meeting. Further, the board reserves the right to edit any recorded portion of a meeting. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Langley Board of Education at 7:02 p.m. I would like to first acknowledge that the Langley School District is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. We gather here tonight in an understanding of the importance of Yayistal, Skekayais working together and not Samat, Latsamat, uniting ourselves with one mind, one heart, to ensure that we support and inspire all learners to reach their full potential. I'd like to start the evening by introducing everyone here this evening. First of all, I'll start with the Board of Education on my far left, Trustee Neufeld, and then we have Trustee Fox, Trustee Rye. On the far right, we have Trustee Ward, and then we have Trustee Dickinson, Vice Chair Wilson, myself, Candy Ashdown, and to my left, I'll try to get this right this time. I think I called you Superintendent last time. Secretary Treasurer Isley, and to my right, Superintendent Gill. Then we also have Deputy Superintendent Woody Bradford, Assistant Superintendent Lisa Lenchberry, Assistant Superintendent Marcello Molino, Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shind Chand, Communications Manager Joanne Abshire, Executive Assistant Judy Swanson, Technical Support Specialist 3, Paul Baboa, Technical Support Specialist 3, Vincent Montefrio, District Principal Human Resources Kevin Reeve, Director of Instruction George Koslovic, Principal R.C. Garnett Elementary Zoltan Bako, sorry. Apologies. Teacher R.C. Garnett Elementary Julie Henry, Facilities Director Tristan Schaufler, QP 1260 President Taylor Hollaboff, QP 1260 Vice President Jesse Cowger, LPVPA President Kim Anderson, and LTA Vice President Nancy Peterson. Welcome everyone this evening. I'd like to start out by also doing a couple of announcements this evening. On January 24th, 2017, at the regular meeting of the Board of Education, the following motion was passed. That the Langley School District establish a Diversity and Respect Week to coincide with Pink Shirt Day in February to promote awareness, acceptance, reconciliation, and inclusion for all members of the school community. During this week, schools across the district will be recognizing and celebrating diversity through lessons, activities, and virtual events that serve to promote empathy, understanding, and the importance of inclusion. In line with our district vision, mission, and values, our board is committed to helping our schools foster an inclusive and nurturing culture. On February 25th, 2020, at the regular Board of Education, the following motion was passed. That the Langley Board of Education officially acknowledge February as Black History Month. As a board, we encourage our students, staff, and families to join us in learning and celebrating the achievements and contribution of Black Canadians. I'll now move to report from in camera and hand over to Vice Chair Wilson.
Great, thank you. Tonight's in camera included property and personnel.
Thank you. Trustees, you have in front of you the consent agenda. Could I please have a mover that the Board of Education adopts the consent agenda items as provided? Trustee Dickinson, seconder, Trustee Fox. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, can I have a show of hands? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Next, could I please have a motion that the agenda be approved as presented? Trustee Ward, seconded by Trustee Dickinson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, show of hands, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Moving along to Secretary Treasurer's reports. First, 7.1 amended budget bylaw 2023 to 2024, and I will move this over to you, Secretary Treasurer Isley.
Thank you, Chair. There we go. I just wanted to start off by thanking the Finance Department and Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chan for the work that they have put into preparing the amended budget for the night that is before the board. They've done great work ahead of schedule this year. We were actually able to bring this presentation to the board in the Finance and Facilities meeting this month. So I won't go in as much detail as I normally do, as the board's already seen this, but we feel it's important that the public do see these slides and these information. So with that, I will go through the amended budget that is before you tonight. Just a reminder, we are required to submit in a format prescribed by the ministry, which requires us to report all of our funds. The first being the statements, which is the consolidation of all the funds, the schedules, which are starting with Schedule 2, being our operating fund, which is the bulk of our funding and the bulk of where we'll spend our time tonight. Schedule 3s are our special purpose funds, and Schedule 4s are the capital funds for the district. The annual revenue for the district for all three funds is just over $372 million. The bulk of that being in our operating at just over $290 million. And as you can see, that we are heavily reliant on the Ministry of Education and Childcare, where $329 million of our $372 million total comes from, and $269 million of our $290 million in operating funds. On the expense side for the various funds, and the budget proposed is just over $370 million. Once again, the bulk of that being in our operating fund of $283 million, and instruction being the largest portion of our funds, obviously, at $310 of the $370 million. On the operating revenue, and these, most of these I have more slides on to go through them. You can see that we're increasing just over just under $10.2 million. Slides for all the other items, but the one on this one I wanted to mention was the investment income. With interest rates going up, the investment income that the district has increased fairly substantially over the last 2 years. It's now at just over $3 million, an increase of $850,000. The largest piece of the increase is our funding from our operating grant from the ministry. You may remember in October we updated on the enrollment changes and the changes in the unique student funding categories. You can see those increases respectively at $3.9 million and just under $2 million. We also received funding this year for exempt and admin raises for just under $3.4 million. On our tuition side, the largest piece of that obviously is our international student program. We have 86.2 more FTE in the amended budget than we did in the preliminary budgets. That's just over 1.3 million. And we have 19.382 FTE in student cancellations, refunds, a portion of which the district keeps per the agreements with those individuals for another $300,000 being added to the amended budget. On the expense side, for our operating expenses, those are increasing $8.3 million, and I'll go into detail on all those changes. I have slides for all of those. On the teaching, we added 16 divisions due to the growth, which was just under $1.5 million. But in the preliminary budget, we did have a division contingency of 10 divisions. So that division's offset a little bit to 16. So we netted out at 6 new divisions. We added 3.5 FTE for English language learners due to the growth that we've seen, exponential growth we've seen in that category the last couple of years as the district has continued to grow. We added a counselor as part of the ratio to be above the ratio for counseling to maintain that. We added $212,000 in associated professionals in learning support, as well as 2 resource teachers due to the increase in numbers. Also have more resource teachers and ELL teachers that were added under our classroom enhancement fund. Those increases were offset by late starts, essentially of just over $198,000 and approximately $700,000 in late starts at schools. For our MIN and VPs, we've the last 2 years have implemented a MIN support plan due to the growth we have in so many of our schools. This year we added just over $204,000, as well as $104,000 that was in last year's budget that wasn't able to be spent just due to not available retired VPs and a MIN to cover off all those needs. Also added 3 VPs partway through the year, starting in February till the end of the year, to support some of our schools with some of the higher needs and the higher growth areas. We also added fairly early in the year, starting the year actually, I believe, for September, a new VP that's ongoing at North Otter, just that their enrollment had reached that point where we now implement a VP at that school. On the education assistant side, we've added 33 SEAs, and we've also added hours for just under $78,000 for additional early childhood educators at schools, and that's a category that will slowly increase as we add more and more programs to our schools, as we are now part of, as childcare is now part of the portfolio for Ministry of Education and Childcare. On the support staff, a few little changes. We've added a bus driver, an office assistant in human resources, and a payroll position in finance. Those are the large items there. You also see at the bottom there, maintenance and learning sports. We had a couple critical positions that were retiring that we backfilled early so that we could do a transition for those positions over the year. On the other professionals, we had retirement of our director of IT, so we had a 6-month overlap between him and his replacement. Also, the director of HR took another opportunity in another district. We didn't backfill that position this year, but we did add 1.5 HR officers to do some of the work up in HR. The substitutes, so we added 665 for vacancies in schools, and then another 414,000 in casual replacements. Those are our QP positions. A lot of that is also due to vacancies and late starts as well. On the benefit side, basically the explanation is most of the things you've just heard on the staffing side. The big changes is the FTE ads for teachers of 352,000, the QP positions of 464,000, and then the savings we received on late starts of just over 213,000. On the service and supplies, we have slides on the detail of for these as well. Increase on the supplies and service side of just over $2.9 million. On the service side, I'll highlight a couple of them. The larger ones, inclusion Langley student support has been increased by $107,000. With our international program growing, that comes with higher medical bills of $93,000. We had IT initiatives that were in last year's budget that didn't get completed just because of stuff not arriving in time for $241,000. And you can see at the bottom there, $90,000 for increased services at schools due to higher enrollment numbers and some of the late start savings that they utilized in supplies and services. Field trips up a little amount of $37,000. We're starting to see field trips more regularly as we get back to a more normal state after COVID. Professional development and travel. We initiated a wellness, health and wellness initiative for our principals and vice principals. There's a clause in the QP collective agreement for $87,000, and we added a new teacher orientation program for $100,000 that we've implemented this year. On the dues and fees, once again, international program with the enrollment being up there has increased that by $186,000, which is the bulk of those increases. The insurance is increased due to the premiums we pay to school protection for our insurance. That's just been going up over the last 2 years, just with the cost of everything going up. So too does the replacement cost for insurance. So those premiums have slowly been rising with the cost of inflation as well. On the increase in supplies, we added $100,000 for literacy resources. With the growth in Indigenous education students and some carry forward funds, there was $161,000 added into their supplies. Schools added $911,000 in supplies and also added $214,000 in equipment and technology and $100,000 in photocopying, all added at the school level. All those increases were offset by a reduction in our utility bills due to lower natural gas costs, and also the fact that we've had a milder winter, at least until this week. On the capital side, a lot of additions here. You can see the spring budget, the changes are in the middle column, and the fall budget being on the end. So going from under 7.2 to just over 12.4. Some of the bigger items, IT and hardware, some of that due to growth, and $715,000. A new item, the district's ERP system is getting fairly old. So we've set some funds aside from the growth that we received from the international student program to put some funds aside to work towards a new ERP replacement. That work won't necessarily be completed this budget year, but wanted to set the funds aside, and anything that's not spent will be restricted and be used in subsequent periods. Due to the growth, we've had to add a fair bit of furniture and equipment at schools for $611,000. Unfortunately, we had a repeat break of a water main at Blacklock, so put aside $200,000 to retire that main to the school, with the work hopefully being done soon. We also had a lot of capital projects initiatives that weren't completed in June for things that hadn't arrived for $623,000. We purchased a double portable that was being used by a daycare at Douglas Park for $385,000. We also had $845,000 in portables that didn't arrive by June 30th. They arrived in July and August, and we're all set up for September school start. And we are also planning to move 5 existing portables. So we've set aside $400,000 this year to move those portables to new locations for next September. So all that being said, that brings us to a operating deficit of just under $6 million. With the plan to fund that deficit through the restricted amounts that we have, 2.9 million of that came from items that weren't received in time last June, 125,000 for projects that weren't completed, 77,000 for Indigenous education that wasn't spent. We had previously restricted the $2.56 million to balance the preliminary budget, which we will continue to need, and $264,000 in school surpluses to get us to the $5.969 million to balance the amended budget. The special purpose funds, just a reminder, those are funds that are targeted for a specific purpose and have rules around them under the accounting treatment that we have to do, that we have to report them separately. And there's a long list of them. Most of these are not a lot of big changes. Most of the changes you see there are amounts that are carryovers from the previous year that weren't spent, that we are allowed to spend in the subsequent period. That being said, the Classroom Enhancement Fund, I mentioned earlier that we added resource teachers and ELL teachers. You can see that increase there of $10.9 million. So our classroom enhancement now is just over $51 million. We also just wanted to point out the $474,000 left of the Student Affordability Fund. That was the fund that was announced by the ministry last school year. Not all of that was spent, and the ministry allowed us to carry that over and use it for the same purpose for this year. And there's a plan in place for that to be used, I believe, in the next month or so. There was also a new fund that we worked with the city and the township called Building Safer Communities Funds. We've called it Project Blackfeather. So it's a fund to support students for $1.1 million, and that's a new program that we've taken on with those two entities. So in your package, you will see the budget bylaw, which is the amount on your screen. So the total budget bylaw would be for just over $383 million, and there are the breakdowns by the funds, which are in your package there for you tonight. As well as before that, we would need a motion from the board on the amounts from the restricted surplus to be appropriated so that we can actually submit a balanced budget. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, maybe first of all, from trustees? Questions? No? Okay, so we have 5 motions before us this evening with regards to the budget. So the first motion, I'll need a mover that the Board of Education approves staff to appropriate and restrict the following restricted surplus amounts to balance the 2023-2024 amended budget: $2,937,040 internally restricted for commitments 2022-2023, $125,000 internally restricted for initiatives not completed 2022-2023, $77,271 internally restricted for Indigenous education, $264,997 for school surpluses. Do I have a mover? Trustee Fox, seconder, Trustee Dickinson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, show of hands, please. Those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Now, moving along to our next the next motion on the table, that the school district number 35, Langley, amended annual budget bylaw 2023-2024 in the amount of $383,173,373 be given first reading. Do I have a mover, please, for the motion? Trustee Dickinson, seconder, Trustee Fox. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, show of hands, please. Those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Next motion, I'll need a mover that the school district number 35, Langley, amended annual budget bylaw 2023-2024 in the amount of $383,173,373 be given second reading. Do I have a mover, please? Trustee Rye, seconded by Trustee Neufeld. Do I have any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, could I please have a show of hands? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, and next motion that I'll need a mover for is that the Board of Education of School District number 35, Langley, approves having all 3 readings of the amended annual budget bylaw 2023-2024 in the amount of $383,173,373 at tonight's meeting. Moved by trustee Fox, seconded by trustee Ward. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, show of hands, please. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. And the last motion with regards to the budget that I'll need a mover for, please, is that the school district number 35 Langley amended annual budget bylaw 2023-2024 in the amount of $383,173,373 be given third reading, passed and adopted on this 27th day of February 2024. Do I have a mover, please, for that? Trustee Neufeld, seconded by trustee Dickinson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, show of hands, please. Those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and next we have, that was a lot of reading. All right, next on our agenda, we have superintendent's reports. First item is 8.1, district calendar 2026-2027. I will pass this over to you, Superintendent Gill.
Thank you, Chair. This evening we have District Principal of Human Resources, Kevin Reeve, here, who's going to be presenting for us the 2026-2027 calendar. As we have done in the past, we like to have at least 3 years of calendar approved, or at least on our website, so that parents can begin planning should they have trips that they need to plan in the future. And so we have had those in place. Further, of course, is the specific calendars that are done kind of at the more of the micro level with all the Pro-D days and all the rest of it that are done through consultation. We begin that process as well. So I'll pass it over to District Principal.
Thank you, Superintendent Gill. So as Superintendent Gill said, we're looking at the district calendar for 2026-2027. The one big point is we need to be calendar compliance with the Ministry of Education, and the purpose of the district calendar has been reviewed to ensure it complies with all relevant school calendar regulations. And the proposed district calendar meets the minimum hours of instruction per year specified in the school calendar regulations. And for the province of British Columbia, kindergarten has 853 hours, grades 1 to 7, 878 hours. Thank you. And grades 8 to 12, 952 hours. The proposed district calendar only details, as Superintendent Gill said, instructional days, non-instructional days, statutory holidays, and vacation days. We will not be looking at specific days of some of the other items that are traditionally on our calendars. And the consultation process of this proposed calendar will start on February 28th and conclude on March 28th, 2024. This is in compliance with ministry calendar regulations. A smaller picture of this calendar for 2026-2027. Yellow represents holidays, so you see July and August are all in yellow, and then in September we don't start the 2026-2027 school year to September 7th. You'll also see that the statutory holiday for Truth and Reconciliation is in orange, and then all other holidays and Pro-D days are in red, for a total of 8 days in red, including the Truth and Reconciliation Day. We also have our 2-week spring break in the 2026-2027 school year planned there as well, with it being Easter being included in that year. And the recommendation that the Board of Education requests staff begin the consultation process for the district calendar for 2026-2027.
Sorry, got my mic. We have a motion in front of us. Trustees, if I could please have a mover that the Board of Education request staff begin the consultation process for the district calendar for 2026-2027. Moved by trustee Wright, seconded by trustee Fox. Any discussion on the motion? Oh, trustee or Vice Chair Wilson.
Yeah. I just had a quick question. Since Easter is falling into spring break there, how does that affect our different, like our teachers and our support staff? Like contractually, is everybody, how are they off?
Yeah.
then?
Thank you. Contractually, we meet the agreement based on a letter of understanding that we have for calendar variation minutes that we have with the Langley Teachers Association. And it also, because of where the holiday for Good Friday and Easter Monday fall in, you see at this particular year in March, we have our contractual part of spring break, which if my eyesight was much better, I believe it is March 15th. The third week of March is our contractual piece of spring break. And then our calendar variation, our 5 calendar variation days are is the following week. And if I could read that, it's the next 4 days. And then we have Good Friday, which is a statutory holiday. We also, the BC, province of BC doesn't recognize Easter Monday as a statutory holiday. However, we recognize it at the school district. And then therefore the 5th calendar variation day would be the Tuesday. And then we would return on the Wednesday.
Great, thank you.
No, any other trustees have any questions? No? Okay, seeing no other questions, then sorry, we did have a mover and a seconder for the motion, so we just need, seeing no other questions, show of hands, those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving along to 8.2, communicating student learning, student inclusive conferences.
Good evening, trustees. As you read in your board report, in 2018, the district started a communicating student learning think tank. And at that time set a goal of making communicating student learning to families meaningful and manageable. We have here tonight to speak in more detail of that journey over the last several years, District Principal George Kozlovic, as well as representatives from the first pilot school in 2019, RC Garnett Principal Zoltan Bako, and teacher Julia Henry.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm very honored to be here with Julia and Zoltan. We have been on this journey together. They've been at Garnett from the very beginning, so they've been along a journey from the very beginning for a number of years, as Mr. Wino mentioned, and we're very happy to be here tonight to share a little bit about the journey and where we are today in Langley with student inclusive conferences. So just to start, just to make sure everybody's clear, I'll just speak very briefly about what student inclusive conferences actually are, but I'm not going to go into much detail because that is why we've asked Julia to be here, because she, as a classroom teacher at RC Garnett, she is the one that actually does student inclusive conferences, so it'd be much more valuable to hear from her in terms of her experience. But Julia has also been part of this from the very beginning. Not only was she a teacher at Garnett that very first year, she was actually part of the think tank that helped us in moving this direction, was very instrumental in helping us get to student inclusive conferences. So what is a student inclusive conference? As you can see, it's an individual 30-minute learning conversation that involves all parties to a student's experience in school, the student, the teacher, and the family. It is also supported by a streamlined, what we call an anchor document, which is kind of like a report card, but a little bit different. You'll hear more about that. And basically the student inclusive conference, the conference and the document replace what has traditionally been the MyEd BC report card that teachers would do and parents would receive at the end of term 1 and term 2. And because it involves 30-minute conferences with every student, Teachers are provided a window, depending on the school, of roughly around 2 to 3 weeks to complete those conferences. So that in very general terms is what it is. I'm going to let Julia explain much more detail how it actually works. My part is more to talk about why. Why did we move in this direction? Why the change towards student inclusive conferences at the elementary level? And as Mr. Muino said, the biggest reason was we are finding that these conferences are much more meaningful to students, parents, and teachers. One of the things we heard when we went down this journey from teachers and from schools was our teachers, elementary teachers, were spending hours and hours, and I mean hours of their time on weekends and evenings writing these very eloquent report cards that were getting posted into MyEd BC. And we discovered that many parents weren't even reading them or accessing them for a variety of different reasons. So we did some research, we did some digging into MyEd, and we found that roughly, depending on the school, maybe 60 to 70% of our parents were actually accessing these report cards that teachers were spending all of this time writing. The other thing we heard from parents is lots of parents who were accessing the report cards, they read the report cards, but maybe didn't quite get or understand exactly what their kids were doing in the classroom. You know, sometimes as educators, we're guilty of using educational jargon and when we write report cards. And so parents were not necessarily having a clear picture of what their child was doing at school. So we really wanted to come up with a process that was really meaningful to parents. The other thing is these conferences align more. Around the same time that we started this journey, the curriculum in British Columbia changed to a more personalized curriculum for students, to a much more competency-based as opposed to content-based curriculum. And so the conferences really align with that. They align with a focus on students' competencies, and really actually on what a student can do, the skills and competencies that they have. And as part of that, it really brought the student voice into the conversation when it came to assessment. Prior to that, students didn't necessarily always have a huge voice in the reporting process. And now within student inclusive conferences, the student voice is actually super important to that. And you'll hear that when Julia describes how she runs her conferences. And then the last couple pieces, we've also just started this year in the province with an official ministry reporting order. As you know, in Langley, because we've spoken about it a number of times, we've been moving in that direction for a number of years to be ready for that. And this process really aligns better with what the ministry wanted when it came to reporting in terms of a focus on growth and progress as opposed to focusing on letter grades and percentages. So it really aligns with that. And then the last piece, you'll see that visual there, that is our district's, those are our district's guiding principles of assessment, which were actually created by that think tank that Julia and myself were part of. And we created those prior to starting this journey. And when you look at what our student inclusive conferences do, the items on there, they provide families meaningful information, they empower students in their learning, and they really help teachers inform their instructional design. So student inclusive conferences really align nicely with those guiding principles. So another reason why we moved in that direction. And the last piece I'll talk about is just a little bit in terms of how we got here. So we started this journey, as Mr. Muino mentioned, in 2019, 2020. RC Garnett was our first school. We started with one school. We did so very purposefully because it was a learning journey for us. We had a lot to learn in this process. We learned from other districts. Maple Ridge has been doing student inclusive conferences for years before us. We also had teachers from Surrey who do this type of work as well. So we had those teachers come in and meet with our Garnett teachers as we were going through this process. The other thing that we did is we didn't start right away in term one. We did that very purposely because we know how busy September and October are. So all of the schools, when they start with student inclusive conferences, we start in term two to give them from September until about Christmas time to learn and become familiar with the process before they actually have to do it. So did the same thing with Garnett in 2019, 2020. They actually did their conferences for the first time in February, March 2020. And if you remember what that time was, that was just before COVID. So that was the very first time we did student inclusive conferences. And then the following year, we added one school, which was Dorothy Peacock, and followed the exact same model. But this time we were able to use the teachers from RC Garnett to teach the teachers from Dorothy Peacock as we onboarded them to that new process. And so that was super, super helpful. The other thing is we really relied on a lot of feedback from the teachers from RC Garnett in the process. And so that's been a really important part, is listening to teachers who are doing this work and making adjustments as we go along through the process. And then the following year, we added 2 more schools, Lynn Fripps and Shortreed. Again, partnered up each of those schools with one of our more experienced schools and went through the same process. And the other thing I want to mention as we went through this process, we also worked very closely with the Langley Teachers Association through the Joint Ed Change Committee, made sure that they were involved in all of these conversations and were supportive of that work. And I'm very proud of the relationship that we've built through that and the work that we've done. And as we moved in 2022 to 2023, we worked together with the LTA on a joint statement that we put out between ourselves, the district, and the LTA in support of the conferences, and really could not have done this work without their support, and have appreciated their support throughout this process to help us move to where we are now. Last year we expanded, added another 10 schools, again, followed the exact same process, partnered up all of our schools, and got to a point where we felt this year we needed to move to a full model. And so this year, starting actually right now in February of 2024, all of our elementary schools in term 2 will be moving and doing student inclusive conferences. Yesterday was the design and assessment day for elementary schools. So most of them, teachers were getting ready, doing their prep for those conferences, getting their document ready. Some teachers actually started their conferences yesterday afternoon, and over the next couple of weeks throughout the district, teachers will be conducting these student inclusive conferences with families and students up until around the 8th of March, when they will be completed in most of our schools. So that's the background in terms of how we got here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julia to tell you more about the real important part in the work that they do in the classroom with the students and parents.
Thank you. Thanks, George. And thank you to all of you for letting me come here and talk about something I'm very passionate about, something I've obviously been involved with for a long time. It's not my only area of passion, as Zoltan would tell you, but I have a few. So as George said, this is a 30-minute conference involving the student, the teacher, and the parent or guardian, somebody who is really involved in the child's success at school. The first thing I have students do is share evidence of their learning. So everything I want to do in this conference is going to be evidence-based. I want them to share work that they've done, and I want them to talk about what they perceive the learning is in that particular piece. Now, I do mine through a digital portfolio. Other teachers do theirs with a combination of work and digital, or just the work that they have in front of them, or the work that's on the walls. Very often our kindergarten, grade 1 teachers, a lot of the work is needs to be shown in the context of the classroom. So once the student has had a chance to share their work, I am going to share what George refers to as the anchor documents, and we'll show you an example of that in just a moment. But that's my voice, and what I'm saying is where I see them being successful. And I talk about areas of future growth because at the end of the conference, we're going to set collaborative goals together. Then I'm going to invite the family to share their reflections on growth that they've noticed. And sometimes they will have a hard time doing that. We send home a reflection page before the conference to remind them of the conference and to give them an idea that we're going to be asking them these questions. By now, the Garnett families, of course, are used to it. So it's not an assignment for them. I'm not collecting anything, but I'm giving them a question to reflect on in case it's helpful for them. At this point in the year, I'm also including all of the term 1 goals that we set at the end of term 1 so that they remember what they were. I've been working on them with my students all term, but they haven't necessarily thought about it again since we set them in November, December. And I think that's one of the real powers of this, and it really aligns with the reporting order, that students are setting goals for themselves and working on things that help them move towards those goals. So this is really built into this system. And what I've really seen the power of is when we do it the second term. I know George said for the first time, teachers have to have that time to set up. But when you actually do it the second year and you do it twice at the end of term 1 and the end of term 2, then you really see the power of setting those goals and coming back and reflecting on the ones that still need to be a goal for that child and the ones they've accomplished. So those collaborative goals are a huge piece of what we're doing in that last few minutes of the conference. And as George said, it replaces the traditional report card with a communicating student learning document, which is so much more meaningful for families. So this is not to be read. This is just how much there is in that document. So I'm going to fill out where the evidence of learning is that we're going to be looking at on the first page, and social emotional development. But the bottom 2 boxes on the first page, the one to your left, are blank when the parents come. The literacy box is filled out by me, the numeracy box, I choose proficiency levels. But those of you that are interested in the subject, like I am, for literacy, we have 3 proficiency levels, one for reading, one for writing, and one for oral language. Because every other report card ever makes you combine those into one thing. And there are those children that read wonderfully well or speak wonderfully well, but maybe their writing isn't quite on par. So it's hard to choose one proficiency level for that child. Numeracy, we have a box to say what we're doing in class, how the child is doing, and then we have this lovely box called inquiry. So all through education, we're told to integrate subject areas, put things together like real life, but then separate it out for the report card. Well, this allows us to put that whole learning in there, the whole integrated unit in there, and give a proficiency level for that. The bottom 4 boxes are just those other subject areas we are reporting on that term. Very simple, but it doesn't mean I can't talk about it. If the music teacher tells me, hey, this child is doing an amazing job in music this term, I can talk about that. If I want to say something about science and it isn't even on there, I can, because we're in a conference, we're having a conversation. So this wasn't intended for you to be able to read all of that. It just tells you it's limited to 2 sides of 1 piece of paper. So teachers cannot write anymore. The boxes do not expand. Yeah. So it is a conversation. It's not a written report. The emphasis is not on the written report. And the pushback from teachers generally has been about that written report and not knowing what to do with it. And it really isn't the biggest piece of this. The biggest piece is to be able to hear the student's voice, to be able to show the family how the student's work reflects the proficiency level. How do I know this is a proficient piece of work or not there yet? Or maybe it's extending, but how do I know that? This is what I look at in that piece of work. We can hear the family's perspective. And as I said before, it's that opportunity to set collaborative goals. Ideally, it's all parties on the same page working towards common goals. I would say it isn't the perfect solution to reporting. There are some teachers that are not going to like it. There are some parents that are not going to like it. There are some students that are going to find it difficult. But the majority of people, those of us that have been doing it for several years now, love it. So with that, I'll give it to you.
Oh, you have more? You've got more to say?
Yep, there should be these little things telling you what's coming up next. Yeah, so student ownership, voice, and agency, as Georgia was saying, that's such a huge part of what assessment should be about. We want our students to know what they're learning about. We want them to care, and we want them to be able to articulate it. So there's a huge value placed on their learning. We want this to all be strengths-based. We don't want to be harping on where kids are not at yet. We want to let parents know where they are, growth that we've seen since the last time we met, and then to set goals so that the next time we meet, it's going to be even more successful. And as George says here, we want the kids to see that the kids have a team wrapped around them that is supporting them. I think this time I'm done.
Let's check. There you go. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank George for his leadership in making this all come together. But as you can see, working with Julia, her passion is just over the top and undisputed. And certainly without her input, this would never have been as successful as has been over the last 4 years at RC Garnet. So certainly a big thank you to both of them. Certainly Julia working on staff. We have a lot of passionate conversations about this and many other things. So pleasure to be here to talk a little bit about this this new way of reporting student learning. Again, not to repeat what's already been said by George and Julia, but the conversation versus written report is really key. And as you know, teachers have a way, we live in, we're immersed in the educational world, and sometimes we have education jargon, we have abbreviations or acronyms, and sometimes the parents who don't read the reports just get overwhelmed by it. And sometimes communicating clearly where their child is at and how well they're doing is really important. And this way of communicating student learning really breaks down some of those barriers, especially when the voice is the child's voice primarily, guided by the teacher, a lot of questions with the parent. And certainly, I said the greater awareness of the child's learning is one of the intentionalities we had here, and certainly is coming through, and we see it each and every day when we do it. And as well, we get a lot of feedback from parents that we're really hitting on that as well. So the voice of the child is key. It is the number one thing here. And what's really neat is we've at RC Garnet been doing for 4 years. And of course, at first wonder where the kindergarten is going to be at. How do they communicate that? And of course, there's a learning curve there. But by the time they're in grade 4 now, it's unbelievably impressive how well they can articulate their learning, where they're going, set goals. It's quite impressive, and it's really, really rich. Obviously, getting parents and the student involved in setting goals, when it's meaningful to you, then it's obviously easier to maintain and continue that goal setting. The first term to second term follow up certainly gives a direction that in other methods of communicating student learning, report cards just simply isn't there. So it's really, really powerful and wonderful to see. So over the course of doing this, specifically in the first 2 years, we spent some time soliciting some feedback from parents. And here's some questions. Over the course of the first 2 years, we sent out a questionnaire, the same questionnaire, and roughly about 200 parents, 200 responses over that time. And so I collated them together to give you a sense of what kind of feedback we got. Some of the comments here really like the personalized feedback of the child progress. Seeing my child's progress is taking ownership of the learning, and that ownership is really, really powerful and something that we all want and aspire to as educators. And we see it each and every day, every time we do this. Allowing the children to use their own words is something that was never there in the report card. It was always the teacher's words. And the key part there is also it's strength-based. We're not looking at deficiencies, and that strength-based is a real shift. And sometimes at first, when parents come in, they want to talk about what the child isn't doing, where are they not attaining? And that's not the purpose. What are they doing? Where are they actually at? And what are they proud of their work? And of course, they get a chance to reflect on where they want to take their learning. The one-on-one time to hear the details and questions with their particular daughter here, more informative than a written report. When we see that, and that's repeated in many other of the responses, and that's exactly what we see. That was really, really uplifting. An opportunity for students to show their work and to collaborate on the goal setting. When is that? I certainly didn't have that as a child, and that's really quite very powerful, and obviously makes the learning more meaningful. So we did some other rating scales, 5 being excellent to 4, 3, 2, 1, and 1 being poor. The first one, rate your experience in learning about your child's learning during the first term. Average 4.29, very, very positive. Rate your experience during second term, the February. Obviously, this happened the second year, 4.16, again, very similar. During the conference, did you feel you had enough time? Because that's always the question. You know, is that 30 minutes, give or take 20 to 25 minutes talking about their learning? Is that enough time? Well, overwhelmingly, 88% said yes. And as Julia said, not everybody, you know, is happy with everything. You can't please everybody, but certainly that is very, very positive results. Parents monitoring student goals. That's the engagement piece in the family. And 82% reported that they were monitoring the child's goals that were set in November or even in March. February, March, they're monitoring it daily and or decently monitoring. Very few said they were monitoring at all. And that's really positive, because to check in on your child and see where they're going is that engagement, the connection with the learning, and the child's not learning in isolation. The parents are really involved, and that makes it all the better. After the two November and the February conferences, did you feel you understand your child's learning better? 81%. I mean, I don't know, that's really, really positive. And that's what we're after, that intentionality showing up in the data. It's just a wonderful experience to see those conversations happening in the classrooms. And I have to say that I've never ever had a parent, well, there's been emotional responses to traditional report cards, but usually it's very negative. They came back the next day upset over a grade. Why did my child get this? Why didn't they get that? As opposed to when they're leaving the classroom after the conference, and literally the parents wiping out the tears because they've heard their child talk about their learning and they just didn't know. They didn't know what they were doing. They weren't so proud of their child. And even some of our children of special needs, they're not left out. Because they can't necessarily, because they're nonverbal, they may not be able to communicate it. We get the support staff, the resource teacher and support staff coming into the meeting, and we've had them, particularly in our first couple of years, they're demonstrating with the parents what that child does each and every day, their routines and communication, developing their learning. Sometimes it's with picture and symbols and picture exchange, and those meetings, those conferences are profound and incredibly emotional. And certainly as an educator, really proud of the work we're doing and where we're going, in connection with the student and their learning, their empowerment with their families as well. So I'm really proud to be part of it, and it's wonderful that it's across the district with the help of George and Julie and all the staff and all the schools as well. Thank you so much. Questions?
Thank you very much for being here and for the wonderful presentation. And I have to apologize for pronouncing your name incorrectly at the beginning, Zoltan. It's Zoltan, right? So just wanted to take that opportunity to say that. Do trustees have any questions? Okay, trustee Vice Chair Wilson, and then we'll go to trustee Dickinson.
Great presentation. Thank you guys for all your work. I can feel the passion when you talk about it, so that's awesome. And you answered one of them already, where I was going to go just about our more complex students and how they're included, so that was really nice to see. I just had one other question about do you have any sort of stats or data you're keeping on what the average is for how many parents, like the ratio of that actually attend? Because I know there's a lot of busy, both parents are working, and so what kind of stats do we have?
We don't have direct, concrete, it's more anecdotal, but give or take, we're over 95-96% of parents that come in.
Wow.
And when those parents don't come in, I sit in and I am the parent with the child, or another resource teacher, another teacher sits in. So the child has an opportunity to still talk about their learning. So we fill that gap. And mostly, with a little time, a little on the phone, little emails, we can usually get parents to come in, we can accommodate their schedules. And when it was through COVID, we were able to use Teams. This does lend itself quite well to online. It's not perfect. We get lots of background kids and all the different distractions, but for the most part, you still can't do this if the information is sent home to have that conversation. And so it still can be quite rich. But mostly we get, well into the high 90s as far as participation.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
Trustee Dickinson.
That can come in. So yeah, that's answered, but I am so excited about this. I think it is so wonderful, and I think you hit the nail on the head with jargon. I know from writing many report cards myself, you're putting it all in jargon speak, right? Or you're finding ways to make it fit. And it's just not a real conversation. So I think this is absolutely fantastic. And this is the way that all districts should be moving. I think you guys, I hope you're modeling this out to Surrey. But yeah, well done, you guys. Awesome.
Thank you. Any other trustees have any questions? No. Thanks again for being here this evening, and for the incredible work that you do. And it's just inspiring to listen to you, and how you're engaging learners to be part of their learning journey and sorry, what's that? Oh, I thought you were calling over here. But anyways, thank you so much for being here and for the work that you do. Okay, trustees, we do have a motion in front of us. I'm just going to get to it here. That the Board of Education receives the report on communicating student learning, student inclusive conferences for information as presented. Do I have a mover, please, for the motion? Vice Chair Wilson. The seconder, please, Trustee Dickinson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, show of hands, please, for those in favor. Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, we are moving along now to Education Strategic Plan Committee. I'm going to move over to Trustee Neufeld, who chairs the committee. First of all.
Thank you very much, Chair Ashdown. At the Education and Strategic Plan Committee meeting on February 13th, fee increases were discussed for the International Baccalaureate program and for the 10 other specialty academies across the district. From the discussion came two motions that I would like to make to the board on behalf of the committee. Motion 1, that the Board of Education approves the fee structure for the International Baccalaureate program at RE Mountain Secondary for the 2024-25 school year as presented.
Moved.
Okay, so moved, that would be moved by yourself then, Trustee Neufeld. So we'll second then Trustee Fox.
We can give this a trustee.
Okay, Trustee Rye. Okay. I know
His
I
name's
can
on
hear you
everything.
say seconded. Okay. So moved by Trustee Neufeld, seconded by Trustee Rye. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, show of hands. Any opposed? Carried unanimously.
And motion 2, that the Board of Education approves the fees for specialty academies for the 2024-2025 school year as presented.
Okay, so moved by Trustee Neufeld, seconded by Trustee Ward. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, show of hands, please, those in favor. Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, our next item on the agenda is from our Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. And I actually chaired that meeting. From that meeting, we have a motion that was approved that the Finance and Facilities Committee recommend to the Board of Education that the district move to consultation for the long-range facilities plan. So I'm bringing that motion to this meeting. And so, oh, are you seconding? What's that? Yeah, we're going to go into that first. Yeah. Yeah, so, okay, so I'm going to pass along to School District Facilities Director Tristan Schofler, hope I pronounced your last name right, and Consultant Les King to discuss the long-range facilities plan and moving forward and next steps.
Thank you, trustees, for having us. We're here today to present the long-range facility plan for the school district. As part of that process, we contracted engineering services from Les King and Associates, and we have tonight the principal, Les King, here to present. Thank you.
Thank you, trustees. Tonight, we're actually going to talk a little bit about the long-range facilities plan. There's a little bit, the plan, of course, is like a roadmap for the next 10 years. And then probably a dashboard for people who are now used to electronics. But it's really to make sure that the information you provide in your capital plan every year is actually supported. Because the ministry requires you to have a plan, and they will check to make sure that the information that's in your plan is exactly how it matches up with requests to the ministry for funding. So that's an important distinction about the plan, I think. But the real purpose of the plan is to look forward for the next 10 years, talk about what facilities are required. And for tonight, because people are watching, I think, and I thought it's worth taking a moment to talk about sort of where we've been and where we're going. And this is a slide, I know you've seen this before, but this is the slide from the past 2 decades, basically. It's Metro Vancouver information. But it shows the rate of growth in all the municipalities in the Lower Mainland here. And at the far left of that bar, there's a little light graph. That's the city of Langley. On the far right, there's a light bar that's Township of Langley. So when you put those together in School District 35, that's where the blue bar is. And it shows that School District 35, as part of the overall Lower Mainland growth, is going the second fastest in the Lower Mainland, only second to Surrey. So that makes looking forward to what facilities you need quite important. Whoops, nothing moving. There we go. So what's important as well, I think, for looking at the yields for children and things is household growth. This chart shows in black sort of the last 10 years of what's been happening in terms of households growing in the district. The blue on the right is the forecasted growth for the city of Langley, and the red is the forecasted growth for the township. So when we look at those, we see that the rate of growth for the households in your district is actually increasing every year. And it's increasing faster every year than the past 10 years. So to build up the long range plan, districts had one since at least the last one was adopted in 2017, and this plan looks ahead from now to 2033. The most important aspect of trying to determine what facilities you might need is looking at potential enrollment growth. And for that, we do a forecast. And I should mention that it is a forecast. I don't have a crystal ball. And in putting the forecast together, there's a lot of district people involved in that. So it's not me sitting away in some room. This is a joint forecast between what I see and what the district sees. And so it's critical to determine schools. What we have right now at this stage as of tonight is we have preliminary information for the next 10 years. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about what things aren't finished in that forecast, but the preliminary information that we have is generally pretty good for most of the districts. The districts that are the catchments in the district that are likely to be affected by changes in the forecast are Willoughby, Langley, and probably Brooksbank. The others are probably pretty close to what we're going to see in the end. So this is what we've seen so far this year. So the red bars on that graph represent the numbers that we see in terms of growth in those catchments. And you see that it's not consistent every year. It actually changes as it goes ahead, but some are up, some are down. The most growth you'll see on that one is in Langley, and Willoughby's missing, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So you see some of the catchments actually have less numbers this year than last year. Schools of choice are not on here because schools of choice are all managed by registration. So you have so many spaces in the schools and you register kids, and you don't need, at the moment, you're not providing more facilities for those. So Willoughby's interesting looking at the last 5 years. because the blue bars are what the total growth in the district has been. And you can see the light brown bars are how much Willoughby is sharing in that. So the expected growth for next year for Willoughby is almost 70% of the growth you're going to see in the district. That's a significant number. So these are the things we still need to adjust on the enrollment forecast. So the first item is effect on Willoughby and Langley. The district's looking at increasing enrollment or intake at fundamental elementary and fundamental middle secondary. So if you do that, it draws students from other catchments. So it's an attempt to help Willoughby and Langley. This year, the district approved some catchment changes in North Langley City. And so we're still working on adjusting how that might relate to the actual enrollment in those schools. The Brooksbank, Brookswood, Fernridge, the township brought in some plans for the new neighborhood plans for those areas. And recently they directed staff to cancel those. So we're not really sure where that sits, and we're still dealing with the township to find out sort of what's going on from there. What are they going to do with that? So that will affect ultimately the amount of growth that's going to be out there. The ministry has introduced a new program this year called prefabricated classrooms. You might have heard the name by modulars. It's the same thing. The new modulars are sort of a restrictive name. Prefabricated is a bigger scope, but it's all the same. And the district's already benefiting that at Richard Bulpett with 6 classrooms. So we're looking at how that might be utilized in the school district for next year and future years. Then there's the impact of the new BC Bills 44, which is a housing bill, and Bill 47, which is transit-oriented areas. So this is really new. Regulations were just adopted by Order Council in January. So, and they're very restrictive about what the municipalities can do. In fact, they force higher densities. Bill 44 allows for up to 3. It requires that if people want to put 3 dwelling units on a single family lot, they can. And depending on the size of the lot, it could be up to 6. Bill 47 for you at the moment only really affects the 2 bus exchanges, the one in downtown city of Langley and the one at Carville. So in those areas, the new rules for those are mandatory higher density residential. So I don't think they're significant over the short term for sure, and maybe not even the long term, because a lot of those both areas around the bus exchanges are already developed. I don't think people are going to knock those buildings down just to build something newer. So we're still trying to figure out exactly what that might mean. And the last thing is federal government's been up and down about immigration and international students. So we're trying to come to some consensus with them about what actually do you think that really means in terms of enrollment here over the next 10 years. So all of those things should be complete by very early in April. And then we'll have actually a relatively final forecast. I don't think the numbers for most of the catchments except Willoughby and Langley and maybe even Brooksbank will change, but those numbers might actually go up. So people are watching, those are the 6 catchments you have in the district. Catchments for schools of choice, of course, are district wide. So some things aren't changing in the long range plan. There's no change to educational programs, or there's no program relocations involved. Alder Grove, DW Poppy, Walnut Grove, catchments, and most of the schools of choice aren't significantly changing. The district's installing 20 portable classrooms again this year in time for September. Additions at Richard Bulpett Elementary, Peter Ewart and Langley Secondary are continuing. The construction of Northeast Latimer Elementary is getting underway. And at the moment, I think we're all waiting for approval for Smith Secondary for the new school. And hopefully that'll come soon from the ministry, and hopefully it'll be confirmed for opening in 2027. We're counting on that. So I just want to talk about the 6 catchments quickly. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on these, but you're going to see this chart over and over. Planning and facility, finance and facilities committee suggests that we have more visuals. So here we go. So these charts are going to be the same. The blue bars on the charts show the enrollment in past 5 years. The red bar on the chart shows the enrollment this year. And the gray ones show what's currently forecasted for there. So this chart is sort of the Aldergrove Elementary enrollment. The black line on the chart is the school capacities in Aldergrove elementary schools. So it shows that in past years we've been creeping up past the actual capacity of the schools. And as a result, you've got portable classrooms there. And for 2024 in September, you're going to add another portable at Parkside and Shortreed. So then that's the little dotted line which says once you add the portables, you'll have more capacity there. So you're going to see this chart over and over. I just want to caution you again that the gray bars are preliminary at the moment. I don't see a lot of change in Aldergrove coming up, but I don't want to say that's the end result either. So Betty Gilbert, the chart on the top shows what's happening in terms of enrollment at Betty Gilbert Middle, and the bottom one shows Aldergrove Secondary. Because enrollment at Betty Gilbert Middle is looking like it's going up, 2 more portable classrooms are going there for September. In Brookswood, the elementary at the top shows it's slowly increasing, which has been in the past. And we'll have to wait and see if there's any adjustment to that based on what the city might do with its new neighborhood plans and approvals to proceed. But all the schools, as you can see in Brookswood, all the elementary schools are basically at capacity now. So the next step is you're likely to add portable classrooms there. We looked at the future growth in Brookswood, and if you think about growing, you can only add so many portables to the schools and you need more schools. So for Brookswood, the best choice for a new school in Brookswood would be a middle school that meets the board's objectives of having middle schools. And it's a better choice than another elementary school. So just to let you know. At DW Poppy, you can see DW Poppy still has space right through till the end. Look at individual schools. You may need a portable at North Otter Elementary over the next few years. We'll see if that works out. But the rest of the schools have a lot of space. I know that previous consultation about converting DW Poppy to a middle secondary wasn't supported. So I'm just reminding you that's where it is. We looked at taking one of the elementary schools, like you did in Aldergrove, and creating middle school. And it turns out because there's only 4 schools and they're spread out a long way, it's not really a practical solution. You need too many kids you have to add portables to that school to make it a middle. And then you really have to redistribute around a big area all the other kids. So it's not really a practical solution to do that. In Langley, Langley City, certainly at Uplands and at James Hill, we don't see any changes occurring at those schools. The other the elementary schools in Langley are all in the north end, basically. The board just adjusted catchments for those. So we're still working at those. And for September 24, 3 new portables are being added at Nickel Elementary to provide for extra capacity there. So I noted at the bottom there that Nickel ultimately, in my opinion, will need an addition as well. You only had so many portables to a school. But we'll talk more with that a little later. HD Stafford is just about at capacity. 2 new portables are being installed there. And at the bottom, you have Langley Secondary, and the red bar shows the impact of the new 12 classroom edition when it opens in 2025. So the thing about Langley schools generally is that I wanted to note that the collective agreement issues may actually require more space in those schools. Still working through that. But it's one of the few that it does. Willoughby. Willoughby is Willoughby is quite a different animal, I think. You can see on the blue graph over there, for the past 5 years, you've had more kids in the schools than the school capacity allows. So almost every school, in fact, you got 30 portable classrooms on the schools in Langley, on the elementary schools. You're adding 7 more portable classrooms there for September 2024. You can see on the gray graphs what the forecasted population growth is in elementary. So it just zooms up there. It's a pretty scary rise. And because you have 30 portables already, you'll have 37 for September 2024. The dotted line shows the capacity provided in those portables. So it should get you to 2024, maybe 2025 with portable capacity, but then you're going to be out. Northeast Latimer comes in 2025, and that's the bump in the capacity graph. So after that, we're still short of schools. So at least 2 new elementary schools are going to be required before 2033, and probably a 3rd one. The middle schools have a similar kind of thing. I won't dwell on this. Both Peter York Middle and Yorkshire Creek Middle currently have portables on site on all those schools. You see at the graph zips up there too. So assuming the ministry would grant Smith Secondary to proceed this year, there's room on that site for a new middle school. And that would bring the middle school on if the ministry approved Smith Secondary now, probably 2029. So it's still quite a ways down. So in the intervening years, that's just more portable classrooms. For secondary, so RE Mountain already has 10 portables now, putting 4 more there for next year. You can see how the graph carries up. That's not unusual for anywhere in Willoughby. The red line shows the impact of Smith Secondary coming on stream in 2027. So kind of hoping that's the case. So Walnut Grove, as the last, I just did these in alphabetical order, but Walnut Grove shows that it's pretty consistent across. The elementary is maintaining pretty consistent in Walnut Grove. The secondary does the same. The secondary has portables on there, which gives it extra capacity, but the enrollment is not significantly changing. Schools of choice, we're not making any recommendations about changing any of the schools of choice. Except one. I just want to note that the district's looking at increasing the intake at fundamental elementary and fundamental middle secondary. So that's but the only change in the schools of choice. That should help with relief in Willoughby and Langley. So what have you learned about all this? We learned that districts should continue to try to implement middle schools where possible. Keeping enrollments in the catchments are important. It prevents transportation issues, but it's not always easy to keep them enrolled at their own school, but it's an important in order to manage the school capacity in those schools. Not having a lot of cross-boundary students coming and going. Portable classrooms are going to be required by the district over the next several years until school capacity comes on stream. And the last item is we're looking at how we might get where we've already got a 6 prefab classrooms this year at Richard Bulpett. We're looking at these prefabricated classrooms next year for Nickel. And we're looking at other schools that might benefit by using these things. The benefit of these, while they're non-combustible wooden kind of structures, is that you actually get a reasonably good quality modular, we think, or prefabricated building. And it's coming a lot faster than if you just wait for the ministry to give you an addition. So we just need to find out where we think we can use them. The ministry got some pretty specific rules about where they can go. After you hear all that, these are the capital plan priorities as we see them at the moment. I don't expect that the order will change no matter what happens with the refining the forecast. But it talks about, obviously we want Smith Secondary as the highest single priority. Then you've got elementary school sites in Willoughby. You got middle schools in Willoughby. You got Nickel. Nickel may actually, if we get a prefabricated classroom approved, it'll move up the list in terms of approval, not in priority, but in terms of approval. And then there's a 12 classroom addition for RE Mountain as well. So then we start talking about Brooksbank, middle schools down the list for Brooksbank. And then the same thing for Walnut Grove. Brooksbank's down the list primarily because it'll be later on anyway. And Walnut Grove is down the list because the K to 7 and 8 to 12 schools seem to be working fine in Walnut Grove. It'd be good to have a middle school, but to have a middle school, one single middle school in Walnut Grove doesn't work because you need too many kids. So you need 2 middle schools actually. So that's a harder sell to people. And then there's the seismic mitigation for the 2 secondaries that are left. So consultation, this was the sort of discussed recommendation for consultation. This was to talk about inviting the various catchments in and talk about what's going on. Also consult with First Nations. There's a requirement in the long range facility planning process by the ministry for staff to liaise with the ministry planning officer once we get to 95% of the plan. Ministry doesn't like surprises. And then any other consultation the district deems appropriate would be appropriate, of course. The timeline to complete the long range plan so that it will be done and adopted before your capital plan goes in is early April. We'll have the final enrollment forecast done. Consultation in April, May. Early May, if there's a need after consultation to amend the document, we can do that. Staff will liaise with the ministry, and then the last 2 steps are Finance and Facilities Committee and then ultimately adopted by the board. So leads us to tonight's recommendation. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Do trustees have any questions, first of all? Trustee Neufeld.
Wait, still blinking. There we go. Thanks for the presentation. Obviously, we know driving through, especially Willoughby, that we're growing uncontrollably, so it seems. But it's good to see the graphs and the numbers and what the portables do, what we're expected up to 2023 or 2033. So yeah, again, thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from trustees? No?
Okay.
It's an inside joke. Don't worry about it, but it's certainly an upgrade from what we saw the first time around. So, and it's all in pictures for.
All right, thank you. So further to the motion that came from our Finance and Facilities Committee, recommending that the Board of Education and the district move to consultation for the long-range facilities plan. We have a motion, recommended motion this evening that the Board of Education approves that staff proceed to consultation on the long-range facilities plan. Do I have a mover, please, for that motion? Trustee Neufeld, seconded by Trustee Dickinson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, show of hands, please. Any opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, moving along to new business. We don't have any new business this evening that I'm aware of. So we will move along to trustee comments. Maybe I'll just do a show of hands if there's trustees that have any comments rather than going one by one. Is there any trustees that have anything they'd like to say, or should we just move along to question period? No, we're good. Okay. All right, so moving along now to question period. Question period is provided at board meetings. The purpose is to ensure that those present in the audience have an opportunity to obtain clarification concerning business conducted during that meeting. Priority will be given to responding to one question per person before considering further questions from any individual. The following will help the public develop questions for question period at a board meeting that is keeping with the goal of a respectful and focused meeting. Questions need to be directed to the chair and not to staff, need to be related directly to the topic on the agenda, need to be succinct, focused, and not be a statement, may not be asked that are related to personnel or directed at an individual trustee, may not be asked that are related to contract negotiations, and the questioner shall provide their name so it can be reflected in the minutes. All of the above are directions provided for in board policy number 7, board operations. The chair may answer, may defer to staff, or indicate a question may not be in keeping with the above guidelines. The board appreciates the public's interest and wants to ensure a professional meeting is conducted with question period focused on providing guests with the clarification they seek. Trustees also welcome questions from members of the public apart from question period. Their contact information is available on the school district website.
Hello, my name is Evan. On the amended budget bylaw, in order to balance the budget, we are consuming surplus again from 17 down to 11 this year. That's been a trend that we've seen. Does the board have a position on if we're trending to reduce the accumulated surplus? Obviously, that potentially puts us in a deficit position eventually. This has been a trend for a little bit. Is there sort of a limit to the minimum surplus that we're willing to have as a district before we make choices on costs? What is the current position on our budget trajectory?
I don't have a position from the board because I haven't been given one from our board, but I will refer over to to our secretary treasurer to answer the question, as we do trust his guidance on our budget.
Part of our strategic plan is to get to a balanced budget structure, and we have been slowly getting there over the last couple of years. I think the point you made about the surplus, it is intended to bring that down because the ministry does look at that as funds that can be contributed to capital and those kind of things. If they're not targeted, we've done a very good job of targeting those funds and have been able to use those in other areas than into capital. We do have an unrestricted amount that is a contingency that ministry does encourage districts to keep. And that would probably be when we would have to start having those conversations when we were getting to that place where that was at risk.
Got it. So the 11 million remaining on Schedule 1 in the unrestricted surplus?
The unrestricted amount, I think, is 4.35, I think it is.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah. Great. Second question on that. I noted it in the long range facilities plan, but with changes in international student caps, et cetera, potentially coming, is there any near-term impact on international student fees that haven't been addressed previously in the budget conversations?
Would be the person to, would that be yourself as well? Yeah.
So the caps that are coming on international don't actually impact our international students. It would impact our non-fee payers that aren't here on study permits potentially. So there may be some other students that aren't able to get in and would reduce some of those potential enrollment numbers, but wouldn't impact our international.
Impacts enrollment, but not ancillary fees. Makes sense. Okay. The people that may be actually able to address my student inclusive conferences questions are not here. So let me ask two additional ones. For the student inclusive conferences, is there an anticipation of a change in workload for teachers to participate in this program instead of traditional work record schemes?
Superintendent Gill, I think this one is yours.
Thanks, Evan. So we have been working with our teachers union as we've been implementing the student inclusive conferences. And I think you heard from one of those teachers, and she indicated the work is different, not harder one way or the other. It's just different. I think feeling that they're being able to get more of a conversation going with students has really been helpful. Spending less time trying to put together a formal written report card, which is again time consuming, probably a lot more time consuming as far as that is concerned around the written part. But certainly the dedication to assessment really is probably similar in the sense that they're still providing the same information to families, just in a more meaningful way.
Thank you. A second thing I heard in that conversation was that there was a significantly lower than expected level of access to reports when they were uploaded to MyEd. Absolute dumpster fire of a program, but I'm curious if there's a concern today that MyEd as a piece of software is a barrier to access for parents and other forms of enrollment and reporting.
Yours as well.
Because I heard it was like 60-some%, like quite a low percentage of folks actually access reports once they were in MyEd. So I'm curious, is that because they're not interested or because MyEd is a terrible obfuscation of reality?
Again, I without having
Sure.
A number of conversations and doing studies, I can't really jump in and give you an answer to that question. What I can tell you is that having folks come to schools and having conversations is a more inclusive way of going through the assessment process.
Got it. Cool, thank you. On fees, I'm curious, what's the current cost recovery percentage on the IB program with the fee increases proposed? Because I know it's not a fully cost recovered program, so I was just curious what the district contribution is versus what's recovered via fees.
It's approximately 100,000. I don't know the exact number.
Okay, great. And for the specialty academies, I'm curious, there's kind of the spectrum of can afford, can't afford, but potentially not in a hardship situation and hardship. Specifically for the folks who are applying under the hardship policy across their specialty academies today, I'm curious how many folks are actually accessing hardship policies in order to gain access to those programs.
The answer to that question would really be at the school level, because those conversations are had with the administration at the school. So, I mean, it's not something we take into consideration as far as total numbers. If there was concerns around affordability for the schools because there was too many people accessing, then we'd become aware of that. At this time, that hasn't been an issue.
For transparency, can I request consolidated reporting of access to hardship programs across the district? Thank you. And my last question, Township ever reply to your letter?
It's not on the agenda, but
It was included in the agenda packet as correspondence.
Oh, there you go. There you go. The answer is no. We have not heard back.
Dope. Yeah. Let me go email the mayor again. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Evan. You always have great questions. Keep us on our toes. All right, seeing, we are at the end of our, agenda. Do I have a motion that the meeting be adjourned at 8:41 now, 8:41 PM? Vice Chair Wilson, seconded by Trustee Fox. Any discussion on the motion? And can I have a show of hands, please? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Have a good evening, everyone.